everybody, it's Julie for EllenHutson.com. Welcome to Hello Monday. We're doing a Christmas in July over on the Ellen Hutson blog, and I'm going to be mass producing or mass watercoloring a holiday card design. I'm going to be playing with the Ginger House set because I absolutely love those little ginger peeps. I think they're so cute. Now, I've started out by taking a piece of Ranger watercolor paper. It's a nice bright white, and I prepped it with an anti-static pouch. This is like 8.5 by 11, and I cut it down to 4.25 by 5.5. So this is a quarter sheet. And then I already figured out where my images were going to land on this quarter sheet of paper, and I mounted them onto the lid so that I could actually stamp this image 4 times with minimal effort onto this piece of watercolor paper. So I'm going to ink up with Versamark ink. This is my favorite heat embossing ink. Go ahead and make that first impression. And then I'm going to take the paper and rotate it. What is it, 90 degrees? Is that 90? Yeah, 90 degrees. So I'm flipping it around, and then I'm going to ink up and stamp again. And this time it's going to leave an impression once again in the upper left-hand corner, but it will be kitty corner from the first impression that I made. And you're going to see there's a method to my madness, why I'm doing it this way, and you'll get it as I'm proceeding with this project. So here we go. Make the second impression. Got it good, and then I'm going to take it over to my little bowl here, and I'm using some stampendous detail white embossing powder. This is one of my favorite embossing powders ever for fine detail line type images or words, or when I'm going to die cut something I've heat embossed, because the heat embossing powder does not raise up so high that it chips off or cracks when I'm using my dies and sending it through my die cutting machine. So I heated up my heat gun for about 30 seconds, and then I went ahead and made sure that all the images were smoothly melted and raised and shiny, no gritty parts left. And it's hard to see because this is a bright white embossing powder on a bright white watercolor paper. So it is tricky to show that on camera, but trust me, it's there. So now I don't have to worry about those images or smearing them. I can put my magnets down without worrying and go ahead and make the next impression. So I'm just slid my paper up higher on the platform. And this is why I'm working with the standard MISTI, because I've got the leeway or the room to go ahead and reposition my paper, and I don't have to worry about cleaning off the stamps and moving the stamps somewhere else. And I really like using the MISTI when I stamp onto watercolor paper because it's textured, and I don't always get a crisp impression the first time, but with the MISTI I know I can re-ink and stamp over it again to get a crisp impression. So now I've got that impression on there, and I can go ahead and take it over to the embossing powder. I'm going to do the same process that I did the first time around and just go ahead and get that all nicely embossed. So I'm just tilting it in the light because sometimes, you can't see. I'm trying to show you on camera, but you can see it almost disappears into the paper once it melts. So now I'm going to grab my waffle flower water media mat. I'm going to do my watercoloring on here. It'll keep my desk nice and clean. And I can use those wells to mix or dilute my Kudetake Ganzai Tambi watercolor. So I have the really big watercolor palette because I love watercolors. I like having all the colors at my disposal. But I also know that sometimes full strength with my water brush here, it can be a little too heavy. I'm too heavy-handed when I load the paint up. So I like having those wells so I can kind of dilute it down, just squeeze a little bit of water out of that brush. And then I also have some paper towel. I had to run and grab it there. So I can wipe off and clean my brush in between, or if I have too much water, excess water on my brush, I can go ahead and mop that water up. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this cardstock, and it occurred to me that you probably can't even see what I'm doing here because the camera is up way high, and as I'm watching this, I'm like, uh-oh. So I actually realized at this point that I needed to drop the camera lower so that you could see what I was doing. So hopefully you have a better view here of what I'm doing. Now my brush is too wet right now, and I probably should have mopped it up, but I figured, you know what, I'm just going to let it pool on there. It'll be a darker green little gumdrop, and I'm just not going to worry. I'm not going to disturb it. I'm just going to leave it alone, and I'm just going to continue with everything I want to paint in one color, I'll get those all done and then I'll move on to the next color. So now I'm working with a really pretty kind of scarlety red color. I'm just going to go around and get all the images, rotating the paper, and hit all of those images with that particular color until I'm done. And as you can see, this helps make it go really quickly. Instead of coloring each image one at a time, just plan your colors and go ahead, start, mapping it out, and then you can just quickly fly through this whole process. And people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you watercolored all these, but it really wasn't that hard to do with a little bit of pre-planning. So now I've got kind of a rusty colored brown to do my little ginger peeps, and I watered it down a little bit because I was afraid maybe it was a little too heavy handed, and then I was like, no, I really like that, so I'm just going to go back and add a little bit more color to him. So the nice thing about starting light is you can always add more color, but it's a little bit trickier to take it away. Now if I needed to take it away, I would add more water to the image and then take a clean paper towel and mop up or soak up that excess color or excess water. But in this case, it looks like I've finally got the amount of water I'm adding to my brush under control and how dark I want the color or light I want the color. So the nice thing about this is it's a lot easier to just come back and make it darker after the fact than it is to come back and lift the color out. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You certainly can. But I'm all about the speed and like, okay, how fast can I whip these suckers out, right? So I'm just going to go, 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 go until I got them all done. Now, I would have multiples if I were making, like 25 of these. I'd have multiple quarter sheets at the ready, and I just go ahead and go to town on this. So I noticed my little ginger peeps looked a little bit like washed out on the sides of their faces. So I'm just adding a little bit more intensity of that color. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the little lollipops, the little sticks on the lollipops done, because that way they'll show up much better, because I did white emboss all these instead of stamping them in black. Now you can certainly stamp them in black, or you could black emboss and then watercolor them in. But I like this look. It's just kind of fun and different for a change. So I just wanted to show you the details up close. I like that painterly look, and I love it when the watercolor bleeds outside the lines a little bit. But the embossing lines do help kind of keep it contained. So if you get kind of sloppy like me, it'll kind of keep you from getting a little too carried away with the sloppiness. Now, this is a trick I learned from my friend Carissa Wiley, and that's to take the dies and position them over the stamps and then use some purple tape to connect them all together like a web. So these dies are being, so because I'd already cut my dies apart. And usually when I die cut them, when I first get my dies, I'll die cut several times through cardstock and just have them already done. But this time I'd already separated the dies, and I was like, okay, so this is the way I'm kind of keeping them connected temporarily. I'm just double checking to make sure that I got a clean cut all the way through the watercolor paper, and I'm sending these through my Gemini Junior. So now I can go ahead and pop those images out, realign my little web of dies over the next group of images, and go ahead, pop those out. So I'm just double checking every time I pass it through to make sure I cut all the way through, because I don't want to remove those dies if I didn't get a clean cut all the way through. I'll want to send it through again. So I'm just going to keep doing this process till I have them all die cut out. And then I wanted to make a plate. So I'm going to simulate the effect of like a cookie plate by nesting my Hero Arts circle dies together like this to create a rim that would go around the edge of a plate. And then I'm going to pop that up with some foam tape. So I'm just taking some strips of that. Now I don't need to pop up the whole thing because I'm only going to position it over here in this corner. So I'm going to plan a little bit more. I've taken the greeting, and it says goody goody gumdrops, which I think is cute and fun. And then I'm going to grab this really small gingham pattern from the Plaid Maker stamp set, and I'm going to position it so it looks kind of like a towel or a napkin tucked underneath my plate. So now that I've figured out where that's going to go, I'm going to go ahead and ink up, and I'm using a Catherine Pooler dye ink. This is a water-based dye ink. I love this color, and it's going to go really well with this blush cardstock. It's called Pale Rose. I always want to call it blush because it's such a soft, pale pink, but it's by Basil as part of the Card Shop collection, and it's a really pretty soft pink, and it's called Pale Rose. So now I'm going to take that inner circle, and I'm not going to pop that up. I'm going to let that sit down in the bottom And as you can see, I actually didn't have quite enough foam tape there on my rim there of the plate. So I'm just going to come in there really quick and add a little bit of foam tape there, peel away the liner, and that'll give it some support there on the edge of the card. And then I can go ahead and take my scissors and whack off the excess that's overhanging. And I'm going to take all my little elements here that I've already die cut out and just kind of futz around with where I want to put them. And of course, I go through a process here of figuring out what I want to do. I didn't want to have too many of them piled on there, but I did realize that I needed to add a couple more of those gumdrops over on the left, because when I was doing the layout here, as I pulled the card together, I was like, oh no, it's off balance. So I wanted to create that visual triangle, and to offset my imbalance there, I had to add another visual element there so that the eye was happy as it went around the card front. And there you go. It's a great way to mass produce your holiday cards. All the supplies are available at ellenhutson.com, and I hope you found this tutorial enjoyable. Thanks for watching.